Initial Thoughts is a spoiler-free movie review series. All opinions are my own.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Initial Thoughts, a series in which we talk about films as and when they are released. Today's film we're talking about is The Fantastic Four, which is directed by Matt Shakman and stars Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Evan Moss-Bachrach, and Joseph Quinn. So of all the different superhero movies we've had over this long period of time, really, all the way back to kind of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, the first X-Men movie, ever since then, and particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, we have had so many superhero films. So many different characters introduced, whether it be Marvel, whether it be DC. We've had so many. But I can't think of many that are getting a third chance. Because Fantastic Four has had the kind of late 2000s, was it late 2000s? The Ian Grufford, Jessica Alba, Chris Evans characters, and Michael Chiklis, wasn't that who was the bunch of that Fantastic Four? And while I would class those two films, the first and The Rise of the Silver Surfer, as guilty pleasure, but not totally full of quality, let's be honest. More of a fun film than a serious story. And then you've got one of the worst superhero outings, I think pretty much everybody unanimously agrees, that we've had over this whole period of time since we've had superhero movies on as a norm, as a regular occurrence. Fantastic in 2015, was it? The Miles Teller, Kate Mara one. That's up there with one of the worst superhero films I've seen, and I think most people kind of feel the same way for that. But the reason I bring those up is, as I say, that we haven't really had, we've had a few superheroes that have had maybe a swing and a miss and then they come back a second time. I think of something like Daredevil. We had the Ben Affleck version, which wasn't so good. Then we had the Charlie Cox version, which is fantastic. We had the Topher Grace Venom in Spider-Man 3, not so good. The Tom Hardy Venoms, again, not the best films of all time, but certainly a fun character, and a lot more fun than it was in that original outing. But I can't think of any that are getting the third chance. Until now, we have the Fantastic Four, a whole new bunch of cast, and will be in the MCU. Ties into the MCU, but in this film is its own universe that will eventually tie in its own way. So with all that being said, was I excited for Fantastic Four? Well, kind of, to be honest. If I'm being honest, I kind of was excited in the sense of, okay, it's a fresh take. I like all the cast. I think it's a great set of casting. It's good casting, including the villains as well, we'll talk about later on. But I do have to say, after being kind of burned, no pun intended with Johnny Storm, burned twice, in the sense of the first time round is kind of fun bad, and the second time is just real bad. You kind of think, if this wasn't going to work, if this Fantastic Four film does not work, let's just give up. The Fantastic Four and this kind of first family of Marvel is never going to work on the big screen. So it was kind of the last hope. And of course, this is the MCU one, so if this doesn't work, well, you're stuck with it regardless. So with all that being said, did Fantastic Four first steps, did this introduction to these characters that we know already, but in this new iteration, did it work? I'm happy to say it did. And I'm also happy to say that it is far and away the best Fantastic Four big screen outing I've seen. There's the other ones I've mentioned there. This eclipses them by a good lot. Because yes, it has the comedy moments, it has the chemistry between the characters, but it also has a lot of heart and a lot of emotion. And I think coming out of this film, I think this bunch of characters, particularly Pedro Pascal's Reed Richards, is already one of the more interesting characters in all of the MCU. And for me, that was something that I'd hoped more than anything. I hoped that we would be coming out of Fantastic Four, not only enjoying this movie for what it is, and that's what we'll be talking about today, but also where it leads, and how much of a vital part the Fantastic Four will play with what's next in Marvel, because there's always a what's next. It's not just this, it's always what's next. And I have to say, I really enjoyed this film. Is it the best Marvel movie? No. Is it the best Are they the best characters in a Marvel movie? I don't think so. But there is some moments in here that I thought were really, really brilliant. And also the aesthetic, the kind of time period, it's kind of like old, modern future. It's a very unique, it's kind of, you go back 30 or 40 years, but if they had discovered some of the technology we have now, what it would look like then, that kind of stuff is really interesting, and the way it sets the timepiece, that's something, and a little bit of an attention to detail that I enjoyed a lot more than I thought I would. But let's talk about the characters, because that's the main point. That's what we're here for. And for me, as I mentioned there, Pedro Pascal, who is in everything. I mean, is there anything that Pedro Pascal isn't in at this moment when it comes to movies and television shows and everything? He's everywhere. But I'm still, and I say this every time I talk about Pedro Pascal, I'm still not at a point where I'm sick of him in any way. I think he's one of the best and most versatile actors working today. Because I think of him in serious roles, and I would class this as a serious role with a tinge of comedy. I think of him in The Mandalorian, a 95% serious role. I think of him in Gladiator, a serious role. I think of him as Joel in The Last of Us, a serious role. But then when you see Pedro Pascal in comedic roles, The Unbearable Weight of the Nicolas Cage movie, you know what I'm talking about, I can't remember what the whole title is. He is also a great comedic actor. And I think that's why, being the Reed Richards, the kind of straight-faced, serious, smartest guy in the room, but also enables some of the funner comedy moments, I already think, as I mentioned there, I think Reed Richards and Pedro Pascal's version of Reed Richards is going to be, not only story-wise, one of the most vital parts of the MCU going forward, I think he will be one of the best characters in it all. And that's not to discredit the rest of the Fantastic Four here, and particularly Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm. Vanessa Kirby is a great actress. I talked about her a lot when I talked about Napoleon, a film I didn't really like that much, but I thought she was fantastic in it. And she is someone who, when I seen her way back in The Crown, the television series about the royals, I have to say, she is someone who is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And while this might not be her most Oscar-worthy performance by any means, her as Sue Storm in this is one of the more emotionally resonant Marvel characters we've had in a while. The only one I can kind of rival that with is probably Yelena in Thunderbolts. And certainly this year, I think the two of them are probably the most, they connect the most emotionally with the audience. I think her character is really good in here, a million times better. And I know it's easy to say this because I'm just going to say this about all of them, but so much better and so much more depth in it. And this does apply to all four of the Fantastic Four. But I think hers in particular, her Sue Storm compared to Jessica Alba and Kate Mara's Sue Storms, are night and day in regards to emotion, in regards to character depth, in regards to just doing the most when they're on screen in a good way. Vanessa Kirby is brilliant in this. And the other two with Reed and Sue being the kind of heartbeat and the serious and the plot narrative being driven mainly from those two, even Moss Baccarat and Joseph Quinn as the Thing and Johnny Storm they're what I would they're kind of the Groot and Rocket of this movie, if you like. They're the characters that most people come out of this and you go, well, the main two were brilliant, but the ones I enjoyed seeing on screen the most were the Thing and Johnny Storm, which again was the case in the older films, but is so much more relevant here. I think even Moss Baccarat as the Thing, I think that's an inspired casting, and I think he also will be one of the more... I think he doesn't get enough depth explored in this film, but I think if they do another Fantastic Four, which I imagine they will down the line, I think the Thing will be one of the more vital parts of that, and I think he's a real good casting, but I think we're yet to see how good he can be. But on the flip side, I think Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm, and particularly his relationship, let's say, with the Silver Surfer in this film, is probably the part, when that part of the story starts to get developed, that's when I realised this is so much better than anything we've seen before with these characters. And again, not the highest bar before, I'll admit. But I think Joseph Quinn, I mean, of course, from Stranger Things fame. But when I seen that casting, and yes, Chris Evans is fun as the character all those years ago, and of course that was revisited in Deadpool and Wolverine, and fun for that, what that was. But again, I don't think I've seen such depth and, you know, pun intended, the warmth in the character that is Johnny Storm than in this film. But the biggest thing I want to talk about, before I want to talk about the villains, is something that I think everybody who has seen this and the other film that I'm going to refer to has made the comparison. This is basically a live action The Incredibles. You know, the Pixar, what was it, like early 2000s Disney Pixar film. And I think, I don't know if that's intentional, I don't know if that's a homage, but of course The Incredibles was quite clearly a homage to the Fantastic Four. So it kind of swings, it almost has swung back around, if you like. The only thing I can think of was like a comparison was, you know, you had Indiana Jones and what that did for kind of adventurers. And then they wanted to make a game, but they couldn't get the license to make Indiana Jones, so they made Lara Croft, a female version of Indiana Jones. Then they couldn't. Well, then they went to the big screen with Lara Croft and kind of swung back with Angelina Jolie. And then of course you had Uncharted. And then Uncharted was kind of like an Indiana Jones, but then its movie came out with Tom Holland. And then after all that, Indiana Jones became a game, in the irony of it all. So it kind of swings back, is what I say, or what I mean in that, because you've got like these things in media that are such staples, but sometimes the things that they inspire in some ways swing back and inspire the original. That point probably got lost along the way. I probably ended up rambling, so hopefully you get what I mean by saying that. Hopefully that translated well. But I just think that, and by the way, The Incredibles is incredible. It's a great Pixar film, as most of them were at that time, and most of them still are, let's be honest. But I think that particularly the baby element and that character point, that is something that I don't know if that's taken directly as an inspiration from The Incredibles, but if you watch these two movies side by side, you'd be hard pressed to go, oh well, that's near enough exactly the same thing, or that's the same kind of plot point. There's even a part in this where there's an underground, and then in The Incredibles there was that villain, the kind of minor villain. I mean, again, there's a point I didn't mean to make. A minor villain called the Underminer, and that there's kind of like exactly that in this movie. But I don't want to get stuck on that point too much. But I just want to say it is very much like The Incredibles, but not in a way that's negative in any way. Because I really enjoyed that film, and it's kind of felt like a live action The Incredibles. But something I also do want to talk about before I finish talking about cast is the villains. The Silver Surfer I mentioned there before, Julia Gardner's Silver Surfer, is probably a contender for one of the more surprisingly interesting villains in recent Marvel history. She is really good in this role, and the dynamic between her and Joseph Quinn's Johnny Storm, as I mentioned there, is one of the more uniquely, yes, surprising, but also one of the better narrative choices that this movie makes. And I really enjoyed that. And as I say, that was when I kind of was sold and went, okay, we're on for something good here. And the other point, or the other villain, the other point to kind of finish on when talking about cast, is Ralph Ineson as Galactus, one of the big bads of Marvel, as we've kind of talked about for a long time, or there's been talk of, and when Galactus gets introduced, what's he going to be like? And honestly, yes, the final act does have a little bit of CGI, throwy, smashy, but it requires it in a way. And while that maybe isn't as emotionally resonant as the rest of the film is, or the lead up is, I still think Galactus is a good villain, and I would be surprised if we don't see him in some form again, whether it's, you know, Marvel's like, is it going to be another universe's version, or whatever it may be. But I think villain wise, that was also a positive mark for Fantastic Four, the first steps. But the biggest thing I wanted to talk about before we kind of finish off this review, because there's been a lot of positives, and listen, it's not the most fantastic movie in all of the MCU by any means, but what it is in regards to recent Marvel, and I kind of think of everything from Endgame to now, it is and I've been if you've been on the channel for a while and you've heard me talking about Marvel movies, you'll know this is something I've been harping on about for ages. This is finally a good jumping on point. And by that I mean, to get into Marvel nowadays, you have to spend 457,000 years of your life to watch all the TV shows, all the movies, twice to understand and get the connection. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of homework just to enjoy movies. It's tough. And especially with Doomsday on the horizon next year, you could literally just start here. You could say, I want to get into Marvel, but I don't want to watch all those movies and all those TV shows and everything. This movie exists in this kind of pocket, different universe. And yes, it ties in and will tie into Doomsday because we knew that already before we going into this movie. But it also stands alone. It's an introduction to characters that don't interact with all the... There's no part in this movie where you go, oh, that's such and such, and he was in this TV show or this movie, and oh, I've seen him in that. There's none of that. And I know for some people that are kind of crave the Marvel cameos, and for me, I'll admit, sometimes we do get a kick out of it, going, oh my god, that's such and such. For this, Fantastic Four First Steps is its own thing. And for me, that is such a great choice. And actually, you could watch this movie and go, okay, I watched that, I enjoyed that, it's a good superhero film for what it is, but I'm not keen to watch every other Marvel movie that's released after this. You could just watch this, and if you were that keen, or keen to a certain extent, you'd maybe then watch Doomsday, and that would be it. You don't need to go on a whole tirade of watching so many movies and things. And that was something that I didn't expect, I have to say. I didn't expect that to be the case for this. But I really enjoyed that it was. And yes, there's a little bit of a connection, and as you know, post-credit scenes are always a big thing that, you know, have different connections to other movies. But the biggest thing that coming out of this, not only that I enjoyed this for almost as a standalone, I know it isn't, but it kind of feels like a standalone good superhero film, it also made me excited for what comes next. And I know I talked about this quite recently when I talked about Thunderbolts, and we kind of talked about, I think everybody's been having that discourse about Marvel's, or discourse I should say, about Marvel and how it's lost its way for quite a while now. Then it had that reset year last year, just Deadpool and Wolverine. We don't even know if that's going to tie in going forward, who knows. Then we had Captain America Brave New World at the start of the year. A bit of a meh movie. Not disastrous, but nothing to write home about and nothing really memorable either. But then we had Thunderbolts. And Thunderbolts, as I said earlier in the year when I talked about it, I thought this was one of the more fun and exciting... It had me back on board with what comes next from Marvel. And seeing Thunderbolts had me excited for the Fantastic Four. And now after seeing the Fantastic Four, it has me excited again about what comes next. And that was something that Marvel needed to do massively this year. 2025 had to be the year when they get it right. And now, Captain America, Brave New World, I would say they didn't get right. But Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, I think, are definitely positive for what comes next, the bigger picture, because they're always thinking bigger picture. But even just as movies on their own, both Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four have been a real return to form for Marvel. Because I know last year I did enjoy Deadpool and Wolverine, but I didn't come out of that going, I can't wait to see what's next for those characters, I can't see what way it ties in, because it didn't really. And then before that we had, what did we have? Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, stinky. We had the Marvels, pretty stinky. We had, going further back, we had things like the Eternals that'll probably never tie in. You know, there's quite a long list of real swings and misses when it came to Marvel. So it was nice to be talking about two back-to-back good superhero films. And, more than that, not characters that we rely on or characters that we are going into going, well, they were good in their previous movies. Yes, Yelena's appeared a bit before, and yes, Bucky had, of course, with, you know, previous outings, but they were never the main characters, never starring roles. And particularly now with the Fantastic Four, aside from those Fox films, You know, as I say, the Jessica Alba, Ian Grufford ones, and them being kind of fun bad. It's good that we're now getting new characters, and actually characters that seem like they belong. They belong in a bigger picture, but also do enough in their own movies. Because not enough of them are doing that nowadays with Marvel. But yeah, so all that being said, not only do I really enjoy this, and it's one of the better superhero films I've seen this year, I also think I'm fully back on board for what comes next. There's only 2 more films now, or is it 1 more film? I think it's Spider-Man and then Doomsday next year. So that has me excited for what comes next with Marvel. But talking about the Fantastic Four, a film that really emotionally resonated with me in a lot of points. I thought some great character work for everyone involved, villains and our heroes. I thought Pedro Pascal in particular was a real standout. Vanessa Kirby wasn't far behind him. And then even Moss Backrack and Joseph Quinn, both great for what they were, and definitely the best iteration in all regards. The best Galactus, the best Silver Surfer, the best Reed Richards, the best Sue Storm, the best The Thing, and the best Johnny Storm that we've seen on screen. So it wasn't like there was a few that were better, but there was also previous preferences. Every single one of them. There wasn't any that were out of place. All great castings, all great performances, and yes, it is like The Incredibles, but Incredibles is a film I think is really damn great. So I really enjoyed this. As far as rating goes, I think a lot of people are a bit like myself, pretty high on this movie, pretty much enjoyed it, thought it was great for what it was. I'm going to give the Fantastic Four... I was debating, I was very much between a 7.5 and an 8. And I think today I'm going to be generous. I think I'm going to go with that 8. I think Fantastic Four, I liked so much of it. I liked so much of the character work, as I mentioned there. I thought, the way it connects in the bigger picture, certainly, but also as it standalone, that was a great point. But I think the thing that tips it into that 8 for me is how much I wanted a starting point. If I want to go back and go, okay, I'm going to start another phase of Marvel if I'm doing a rewatch, here's a starting point. If you want to tell your friends or your family or your mum or your dad or whoever, you want to tell them, I want you to get into Marvel and then you can go to the cinema with me and watch it. Instead of having to tell them, okay, Mum, you want to watch Marvel with me, or you want to take me to the cinema to see Marvel? Okay, let's sit down and watch 15,000 hours of cinema, and then we can go and see the latest movie. No one's going to do that. Well, some people might, but most people won't do that. Instead, if you said, the Fantastic Four's here, watch it, and then we're ready for Doomsday, and then if you enjoy that, you can go back and revisit the ones you want to. That's great. And that's why I thought this was really good. I think this year has been a return to form for Marvel in their connecting films. They're films that connect for what comes next. And yeah, I'm excited for what comes next. In, a year from now we get the next Spider-Man film. And I'm pretty excited for that too. Although I did like how No Way Home ended, but that's another matter. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I would recommend you go and see it. And I just want to talk, just before I let you go guys, I do want to talk about, because this is a bit of a higher score than I gave Superman just a few weeks ago. And I know people may go, oh, he's just a Marvel fanboy or whatever. If I'm going to be totally honest with you, as much as I didn't think structurally Superman was as good of a film, I think I'm equally as excited for what comes next in the DC universe too. Because Marvel, as good as Doomsday and Secret Wars and everything could be, I also like the uncertainty of what's next for James Gunn's DCU. And for me, having these, but I would love nothing more. Because let's be honest, even when Marvel was on a bit of a dip, that last DC universe, the one that ended with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, but also had things like The Flash and all the way back to Batman vs Superman. A lot of stinky films. The original Suicide Squad, not the James Gunn one. Some real truly stinky films. Marvel hasn't really got to that level, unless you count those Sony films like Madam Web, which make me shudder even at the thought of it. But the point is, the rising tide lifts all ships, isn't that the phrase? I would love for the quality of this rivalry, yes, it's a rivalry, between the MCU and the DCU, if both of these are producing brilliantly enjoyable, comedic character work that has, they have great chemistry with each other, I would love nothing more than... I mean, it'll always spark the debates of which universe is better, and that's fine. But I think this year has done a lot for the... There has been that stigma around superhero fatigue starting to sit in, or has been sitting in for the last 4 or 5 years now. People are getting a bit sick of superhero movies all the time. And I think even like Kevin Feige admitted that they went with quantity over quality. I think now, with this... I mean, it's only been 3 months? But we've had Thunderbolts, we've had Superman, and now we've had Fantastic Four, the first steps. These 3 films have kind of got me back on board with what comes next with both universes. And, well, back on board with Marvel, and Superman, of course, is the starting point. But in both cases, I'm looking forward to what comes next. And for a long time, if you've been on the channel and you've been listening to me talking, and more cases than not, ranting about superhero movies, I'm glad to be saying that. I'm glad to be saying that not only am I talking about the movie in question in this video positively, but also for what comes next. I'm looking forward to what comes next. And if you'd have said to me at the start of the year, that's how you'll be feeling in the middle of the year, I don't know that I'd believe you. So, take of that what you will, but Fantastic Four is great. I really enjoyed it. I thought characters are great. I thought it was by far and away the best Fantastic Four film I've ever seen. And I look forward to seeing these characters again. And yeah, Fantastic Four is a good time. And one of the better summer films we've had so far. Might just be up there with in the bunch of the best summer films we've had. We've had a pretty good summer. Some stinkers, but a pretty good summer so far. Fantastic Four is definitely one of the shining lights of that. So yeah, that has been my review. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day listening to me talking about yet another movie. If you want to stick around and leave a like and comment and subscribe and all that good stuff, I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.